September 3, 2006. The Pashmal Grapefields, Panjwaii District, Kandahar Province, southern Afghanistan. A Canadian armoured vehicle rumbles down a dust track at first light, 8 wheels biting into the powder, a stabilised turret scanning the mud-walled compounds on either side. Behind it, more of the same. Weight, roughly 16 tons. Armament, a 25mm Bushmaster cannon. Crew, 3, with 7 infantry sitting in the rear hull. It was not a tank. It was not built for what was about to happen. Within hours, these vehicles would carry Charles' Company of the 1st Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment, into the opening assault of Operation Medusa, one of the largest NATO ground battles since Korea. Within weeks, they would be fitted with belly armour kits and slat cages welded on in forward workshops. Within years, they would serve across every major operation of Canada's war in Kandahar, absorb more roadside bombs than any other vehicle in the Canadian fleet, carry home more of the 158 Canadian fallen than any other platform, and earn the first ever Star of Military Valour awarded by the Crown of Canada. Its designation was the Light Armoured Vehicle III, and it was the wheeled 8x8 that bore Canada's heaviest combat burden of the 21st century. To understand why the Light Armoured Vehicle III existed, you need to understand the problem Canada faced in the 1990s. The Cold War had ended. The old tracked armoured personnel carriers of the Canadian Army, the M113s, were worn out. Canada wanted a vehicle that could be flown to a crisis on short notice, drive long distances on its own wheels, survive heavy machine gun fire, carry a full infantry section, and reach out and kill with a medium cannon. It wanted one vehicle to do the work of 3. The answer already existed in Switzerland. In 1972, a Swiss engineer named Walter Roof, at a company called MOWAG, finished the first prototype of a modular 8-wheeled armoured vehicle called the Piranha. Canada licensed the Piranha in 1977 and began building it in London, Ontario. A generation of Canadian wheeled armour followed: the Grizzly, the Cougar, the Bison, the Coyote reconnaissance vehicle. Then, in August 1995, the Canadian government awarded General Motors Diesel a sole source contract to build the next generation. The vehicle that emerged was called the Light Armoured Vehicle III. The same London plant, later renamed General Dynamics Land Systems Canada, would build the first Canadian production vehicles in 1999. 651 would eventually enter Canadian service. The vehicle itself was a study in balanced engineering. 8 wheels, all driven. A Caterpillar 3126 diesel engine producing 350 horsepower, mated to a 6-speed Allison automatic transmission. Top road speed, just over 100 km per hour. Range, approximately 500 km. Length, 7 meters. Width, just under 3 meters. Combat weight at the start of its service life, around 17 tons. Armour was welded steel, with ceramic applique panels that could be bolted over the base plates to defeat 14.5mm heavy machine gun fire from any angle. Crew, 3, the driver at the front left, the gunner and commander in a 2-man stabilised turret with 7 infantry dismounts seated in the rear compartment. A rear hydraulic ramp dropped for them to exit. The main armament was the 25mm M242 Bushmaster chain gun, the same cannon carried by the American Bradley fighting vehicle, firing armour-piercing and high-explosive rounds from a dual-feed system. A coaxial 7.62mm C6 machine gun sat beside it. The gunner had a thermal sight and a laser rangefinder. The fire control computer allowed accurate engagement on the move at ranges out to 2 kilometers. A pintle-mounted machine gun on the roof gave the crew commander close defense. 8 smoke grenade launchers could blanket the vehicle in concealment within seconds. This was not a light vehicle. This was a medium-weight infantry fighting vehicle designed to fight for its passengers, not just carry them. The American Striker, built on the same Piranha chassis in the same London factory, carried only a remote weapon station. The Canadian version carried a proper cannon. Canadian infantry consistently had more organic firepower than their American counterparts in the same war. Now, before we get into where this vehicle actually fought, if you are enjoying this deep dive into Canadian military engineering and the wars it was tested in, hit subscribe. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps this channel grow. Canadian Light Armoured Vehicle IIIs deployed to Afghanistan first during Operation Athena in Kabul, from July 2003 onwards. The work there was patrol, presence, and stabilisation. The rifles stayed quiet more often than they fired. That phase ended in 2005. In February 2006, the Canadians moved south to Kandahar province, into the Taliban heartland. The first major Canadian battle group in Kandahar was Task Force Orion, built around the 1st Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Ian Hope. The vehicles they rode were Light Armoured Vehicle IIIs. The province they entered was the spiritual home of the Taliban movement. The fighting that followed would define the Canadian experience of Afghanistan. On May 17, 2006, in the village of Bayanzi in the Panjwaii district, a Canadian forward observation officer named Captain Nichola Goddard was commanding a light armoured vehicle III in a firefight with Taliban fighters dug in among the grape huts and mud compounds. A rocket-propelled grenade struck the turret area. Captain Goddard, standing in the commander's hatch to call in artillery, was killed. She was 26 years old. She was the first Canadian female combat soldier killed in action in Canadian history. On the same day, in the same action, Sergeant Michael Denine was commanding another light armoured vehicle III when his turret weapons jammed under heavy fire. Rather than withdraw, Sergeant Denine climbed out through the air sentry hatch, fully exposed, and manned the Pintle-mounted machine gun on the roof to suppress the enemy and cover his platoon's withdrawal. For that action, he was awarded the Medal of Military Valour. Then came August 3, 2006. Charles Company of the 1st Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, commanded by Major William Fletcher, was operating near the village of Pashmal when a Taliban ambush struck an outlying Canadian position. With rocket-propelled grenades and small arms, the acting platoon commander was killed. Multiple soldiers were wounded. Sergeant Patrick Tower gathered the platoon medic and one other soldier and led them across 150 metres of open ground under continuous enemy fire to render aid to the casualties. He then assumed command of the surviving platoon and led the extraction of the wounded under sustained rocket-propelled grenade and small arms fire. For that action, Sergeant Tower was awarded the Star of Military Valour, the first such award ever made by the Crown of Canada since the decoration was created in 1993. 1 month later, the vehicle faced its largest test yet, Operation Medusa. September 2 to September 17, 2006. The objective was to clear Taliban fighters from fortified positions in the Pashmal area, a network of grape huts and irrigation ditches a few kilometres west of Kandahar city. The force was Canadian, Danish, Dutch, American, British, and Afghan National Army. Commander of NATO Regional Command South was Brigadier General David Fraser. The Canadian battle group was the 1st Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment, under Lieutenant Colonel Omer Lavoy. On September 3, Charles Company crossed the Arghandab River under fire. Within minutes, the assault met a prepared Taliban defence. Warrant Officer Frank Mellish, Warrant Officer Richard Nolan, Private William Cushley, and Sergeant Shane Stashnick of 2 Combat Engineer Regiment were killed. The following morning, September 4, an American A-10 Thunderbolt ground attack aircraft, mistaking a burning rubbish fire for a marker, strafed a Canadian position. Private Mark Graham, a former Olympic sprinter who had represented Canada at the 1992 Barcelona Games, was killed. 30 others were wounded. Operation Medusa succeeded. The Taliban defensive belt collapsed, but the Canadian Army learned a hard lesson. Wheeled vehicles alone could not do this work. On December 2, 2006, Canadian Leopard C2 tanks from Lord Strathcona's Horse rolled forward into Panjwaii, the first Canadian tank combat firing since the Korean War. In 2007, 20 German Leopard 2A6M tanks were leased to reinforce the effort. The Taliban adapted. If the Canadians had heavy armour, the Taliban had buried charges. From 2007 onwards, the roadside bomb, the improvised explosive device, became the dominant killer of Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan. Yellow palm oil jugs packed with ammonium nitrate, pressure plates cut from hacksaw blades, dug into culverts, into wheel ruts, into the crossings of dry irrigation ditches. The Light Armoured Vehicle III had been designed in an era when the threat came from the side and from above. Its belly was nearly flat. Canadian engineers rushed to respond. Belly armour kits were fitted. Slat armour cages were welded onto the flanks in forward workshops to detonate rocket-propelled grenade warheads before they reached the hull. From 2009 onwards, a comprehensive upgrade called the LORIT package added thickened belly plates, enhanced crew protection, and energy-attenuating seats. The combat weight of the vehicle climbed from around 16 tons to roughly 23 tons. Easter Sunday, April 8, 2007, west of Kandahar city. A Hotel Company light armoured vehicle, 3 of the 2nd Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment Battle Group struck a massive improvised explosive device while crossing a field. Sergeant Donald Lucas, Corporal Brent Poland, Corporal Aaron Williams, Corporal Christopher Stanix, Private Kevin Kennedy, and Private David Greenslade were killed. It was the worst single-day Canadian combat loss since the Battle of Hill 187 in Korea, March 2, 1953. More strikes followed. November 17, 2007, near Masumgar, Corporal Nicholas Beauchamp and Private Michel Levesque killed. Captain Simon Mayu gravely wounded, March 20, 2009, in Jari district. Master Corporal Scott Vanelli and Corporal Tyler Crooks killed, December 30, 2009, in Dan district. 4 Canadian soldiers and Calgary Herald journalist Michelle Lang killed. The Canadian Army pushed back. Mine-resistant patrol vehicles were brought in to share the load. The RG-31 Nyala, the Buffalo, the Husky Route Clearance Vehicle. Specialized teams from the engineer route opening capability swept the main supply routes every day before any convoy moved, and still the Light Armoured Vehicle III kept rolling. According to Department of National Defense figures, roughly 13 were destroyed outright by enemy action across the Kandahar mission. Over 150 more were damaged and returned to service. The vehicle was not invulnerable. No vehicle was, but it consistently gave its crews a fighting chance in blast events that would have destroyed lighter platforms, and it consistently outgunned anything the Taliban could bring against it in a firefight. On paper, other contemporaries looked superior. The German and Dutch ARTEC Boxer, at over 30 tons, was substantially better protected. The French VBCI carried more armour for the same gun. The Finnish Patria AMV, used by Poland as the Rosomak in Ghazni province, mounted a heavier 30mm autocannon. In practice, none of these rivals matched the breadth of service of the Canadian Light Armoured Vehicle III. None of them absorbed the volume of combat the Canadian vehicle did in the same theatre, over the same years, under the same threat. Canada's combat mission in Kandahar ended July 7, 2011. Operation Athena closed on December 1, 2011. The Light Armoured Vehicle III came home, but its story was not over. On October 21, 2011, 3.5 months after the Canadian combat mission ended, the Canadian government signed a contract worth $1.064 billion with General Dynamics Land Systems Canada. The task: rebuild 550 Light Armoured Vehicle IIIs into a new standard, thicker double V-shaped hulls to deflect buried charge blast waves, crew seats suspended from the roof to attenuate shock, a larger 450 horsepower Caterpillar C9 engine to compensate for the added weight, a new digital fire control system. Combat weight rose from around 23 tons to 28.5 tons. The rebuilt vehicle was called the Light Armoured Vehicle 6.0. It was, in the words of the manufacturer, the direct result of lessons learned by the Canadian Army in Afghanistan. Every design change in the Light Armoured Vehicle 6.0 is a reply to something a Light Armoured Vehicle III crew lived through in Kandahar. The double V hull is a reply to April 8, 2007. The suspended seats are a reply to December 30, 2009. The thicker belly plates are a reply to every yellow jug the Taliban ever buried in a wheel rut. First factory delivery of the 6.0 was December 2012. The final upgraded vehicle rolled off the London-Ontario line in July 2019. The fleet reached full operational capability in the spring of 2020. On September 5, 2019, Canada signed a second contract, roughly $2 billion for 360 armoured combat support vehicles on the same 6.0 chassis, in 8 variants ranging from ambulance to electronic warfare. The platform has also been exported widely. New Zealand took 105 NZLAV vehicles from 2003. Colombia ordered Light Armoured Vehicle IIIs from 2013 onwards. Saudi Arabia signed a 14-year contract in February 2014, reported at approximately 15 billion Canadian dollars, the largest advanced manufacturing export in Canadian history. That contract remains politically controversial, with serious human rights concerns raised by Amnesty International, Project Ploughshares, and the United Nations regarding the use of Canadian-built vehicles in Yemen. In June 2022, Canada announced that 39 armoured combat support vehicles would be diverted to Ukraine to support that country's defence against Russian invasion. The deliveries began in October 2022. A vehicle designed for Afghan grape-fields was now fighting in the plains of Eastern Europe, and across Canada itself, 33 decommissioned Light Armoured Vehicle III hulls were handed over to Canadian communities between 2014 and 2022 under the Light Armoured Vehicle III Monument Programme. They sit today in town squares and Legion halls and memorial parks, from Durham, Ontario to St John's, Newfoundland, each one painted, stripped, and mounted on a concrete plinth, each one a silent monument to the 158 Canadian Armed Forces members who died in Afghanistan. September 3, 2006. The Pashmal Grape-fields. A Canadian wheeled armoured vehicle crosses the Arghandab under fire, carrying infantry who had never fought a battle on this scale before. It was not a tank. It was undergunned against anything heavier than itself. Its belly was nearly flat when the war began, and its crews paid in blood for that fact until the upgrades caught up. It was never meant to absorb 1,000-kilogram ammonium nitrate charges. It was never meant to fight alone. And yet it worked. It worked in the grape-fields of Panjwaii. It worked in the compound warrens of Jari. It worked on the long straight highways through Dand and Damon. It worked hard enough that its successor was built not to replace it, but to answer every hard lesson its crews learned. It was not American. It was not German. It was Canadian. And it fought Canada's longest war from start to finish. And it brought most of its people home.